Okay, I've hit the start button. Let's go check it out on YouTube. Videos. Live videos, and there we are. Make that a little bit bigger right now. Oh, I think it's ready. I think Blayne's ready. Go add Blayne. It's crazy, crazy.
I see me.
Did you just see you? Do you not see us yet?
I just see your pictures. I see y'all.
Did you just see you? Do you not see us yet? Hello, those people watching. You know the drill right now. It's the usual technical crazies. My camera was off. I don't know why my camera was on, and then I make this a group call, and my camera goes off. That doesn't make any sense. Blayne, turn your camera on.
I'm trying. I don't know how to do that. I forgot push to talk as well.
There's a little, when you start moving your mouse around, there's a little button. You can see the picture of the camera.
There it is.
Huzzah. All right, we got 3 viewers right now. Let's get this stuff spammed out on social media. Welcome.
Mike, you've gone to the hat this week too?
I've gone to the hat this week. I felt left out. Well, everyone else is gonna have a hat. Trying to pull up chat here. Alright, chat is up. Everything working? Well, how's everybody doing tonight? It's quiet. It's too quiet.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting my social on.
I didn't have time today.
Oh. This is actually kind of a hard week.
Yeah, it is.
Patrick, this is another day in paradise. I thought you lived in Atlanta, though, Patrick. What do you... It was really funny doing sort by point from Montreal and Vancouver. Just be like, these guys, they suck. All right, I'll go to the Vancouver. Nope, these guys suck. Oh, okay, South Alabama. How in Alabama? Like, are you like near? Or are you just kind of still in the middle there? Chris enjoying Canada being red. Okay.
Oh, Mike, congratulations on the Little League World Series.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you. I guess the United States is orange. I don't know how that we got that color, but we got it.
Don't they usually play in their Little League uniform? So that they may have had custom ones made, but it should be the Little League team color.
Maybe they do. They do. I'm because I think they kind of change uniforms, you know, throughout the thing, depending. Because I mean, like they're not Southwest. They're like River Ridge. So I don't know. I don't know how exactly. But so Chris, is Canada actually red until the void? Or is it just like the eastern part of Canada is red? Toronto beat Montreal. I don't know how that works. Canadian Classic.
All
Or are we
right.
just all pretending that Vancouver doesn't exist? Just, I mean, I understand that.
I think that's what happens. All right, so I've got the initial I'll give you a chance to answer, Chris. I've got the initial social messages plugged out there on Fantasy Boss and MLSFI Twitter. So please do share those so we can encourage more people to join us for the live recording. I know it's kind of late for those who might be out on the West Coast. Maybe it's mostly East and Central people here, or maybe it's early on the West Coast. I don't know how that all works for you all. Crazy out there, but please share those links so that people know it's on Reddit and it's on Twitter. I definitely appreciate it as we wait for a few more people to join before we get started. I mean, based on Canada's flag, I sort of thought you guys were already just red in general. Or is there like more like deep-seated national like rivalries between like Reds and Blues based on Montreal and Toronto and stuff that I'm just completely unaware of?
So Charles, are you a Montreal fan? Because we need a Montreal fan. We need someone who's going to help us.
I thought Blayne was the token Montreal guy.
I'm about 4 years removed of being a Montreal writer.
Excuses.
Yeah, but we need someone who's on the ground. And honestly, we probably need like a Dynamo supporter to cover their new coach.
We'll get Travis back into action.
Good. All right, well, Charles, you can
I'm gonna
make
message
fun of our
one.
Then tell him to join live chat. Do this. Let's do this. Quebec is distinct and blue. That's fun. That's fair. Did I say that right? Am I supposed to say it that way?
I just sent him a message. He plays in my draft league.
Hey, I am all about the Canada talk tonight, Chris. I mean, we've got this Canadian double game week. It's gonna be talked about. I can tell you that.
We might start singing "O Canada," which is not good because I only know the first two of "O Canada." But...
We could practice like our loving looks towards Justin Trudeau. Like we could do that.
Oh.
All right, well, you guys know the drill. We have started pretty dang close to 9:30 tonight. I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes, and then we're going to get started with the actual recording. And so go ahead and start thinking about any question that you guys have for the round, any just reactions that you have, because Canada is always red. That's right, JoJo. I'm going to be throwing out that question. You guys have been here before. You know the drill, but just get that prepped in your mind, because one of our favorite parts about the show in this live streaming form is being able to react to the questions that you all have. We think that's something if we might say so ourselves, if I might speak for these gentlemen, myself, that we think we have done a better job at being able to react to questions from viewers than even the Fantasy FC guys have over at MLS Official. So, love the questions. Really what I'm doing is I'm hoping that we get like up to 20 watching, and it just now went down to 17 as soon as I said that, so that's lame. But I was hoping to get to 20 before we actually started the recording. But who knows? Like we'll see. It's not back up to 18. There we go. It's not a huge double game week again. So we should have plugged this more with Canada. Like we should have been like, hey, we're talking Canada. We want these Canadian listeners. Get on here and let's get it going. So we should have.
So
really
it was a
that
bank
going.
holiday in England today. Was it a bank holiday in Canada? I don't know why England had a bank holiday. They were. Did Canada have a random holiday?
I mean, I work at a university, so we have lots of random holidays.
Yeah, see, we don't have too many random holidays. We just take a week off in February for Mardi Gras. So we pretty much just throw all of our random holidays.
2 weeks of
Although
Christmas.
my wife's school gets off the weekend before Halloween because there's the Voodoo Musical Festival that like takes place next to their school. So because with all the trucks and stuff going in, they can't have school. So they just like, screw it, we'll have a faculty retreat.
All right, everybody, let's get ready to do this. Are we talking about all dress chips and ketchup tonight? I mean, what? I don't know. Actually made a stream. Well, welcome, Coulter Nunn. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for making it. We got 20 people. That's what I was hoping for. Let's get this started. I'm going to hit the record button on my computer so I can have a backup of this just in case something happens, so I can still get it edited for the podcast. And then we'll kick things off. So here we go. Hello, fantasy managers, and welcome to the round 20. Dang it. Dang it.
It's like a tradition now.
So if we ever redo the intro, we've got that recorded. We're just going to have to make a montage of forgot to push to talk to add to the intro.
For sure. Hello, fantasy managers, and welcome to the round 26 preview episode of the MLS Fantasy Insider. This episode is brought to you by Be Messy, a soccer advice book by Bob Bradley. Actually, brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and the amazing subreddit community of r/FantasyMLS. I'm your host, Reid Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and tonight I'm joined by my usual partners in fantasy, Michael Denton and Blayne Riffle. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm good.
Oh, I'm doing well. Great sports weekend for me.
Fantastic for you, indeed. I'd also like to, as always, at least for the past 5 episodes, welcome our guests, everyone who has joined us in live fantasy chat. That's right, if you still don't know, usually every Monday, unless something crazy happens, around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we record this podcast live in video form, which is super fun, and we have live chat, so we get questions from the community to answer. It's basically like what the Fantasy FC guys do, but not on Twitter and much more interactive. So, because we care. So that's what we've been doing. It's fantastic. We will be having some guests again now that we have some of the bugs worked out with our new streaming setup here, and those guests are going to be our top patrons who have been such gracious donors, and one of their perks for being one of our top patrons is getting to join us as a guest on the show. So as we round the season down, we're going to be looking forward to having those people and followers and friends on the show with us like we did earlier in the year with Jessup Gage. So enough of this intro. Everybody in chat right now is talking about wanting a bloopers reel, which people listening to the podcast don't know. We have to use push to talk now with this new setup, and I typically forget to hit push to talk, and so I just start going, and Michael and Blayne see what's going on. They're like, hey. So if we're either going to have to do a new intro, which includes them telling me that it's push to talk, or I'm just going to have to record the standard intro so that it is not going to happen ever again. But currently the vote is montage. So if you're listening through SoundCloud or iTunes or Spotify or whatever right now, Stitcher, send me a tweet at MLS Fantasy Boss on Twitter. Let me know if you would prefer to have just a standard recorded perfect intro, or if you'd like for me to try to go through and get some of these bloopers to put into a new little intro right there. So that's some fun stuff. I guess that's what Weeby would call the shtick at the beginning of the show that Bobby Warshaw hates so much. But we are here to talk fantasy tonight. So it was rivalry week, Heineken rivalry week. I can't say that any better than Andrew Weeby or Bobby Warshaw can, but we're going to talk about that round 25. Let's start out with how you all did, and chat, get ready because I'm going to ask how you did shortly. Actually, go ahead. Start posting me your scores so I can see what you did. Blayne, how'd you do?
Terrible. 137 this round. It's outside the top 3,000 for the week. I saw that Pedro Santos wasn't starting that first game and decided to shift some things and made a few shifts that I probably shouldn't have. I ended up going with Robles and not leaving enough money to switch to Vega, which probably didn't help very much. But through all that, I forgot to bring in an LAFC defender. Part of my switching, I had extra money from Santos because I was like, oh, we'll just try a Com. He's 4 point something and cheap. And we'll throw him in a switcheroo. And I went and grabbed Rooney for that red card. So I gave up a LAFC defender, a double game week keeper, double home game keeper for Rooney and a -2. And if I hadn't grabbed Rooney, I would have had Tati instead of possibly even having a New York City defender. So it was all kind of messed up. 137. It's just not good for me this week.
At least you didn't have Tarek, though.
Yeah, I did avoid the double red, thankfully.
The double redaroo. Mike, how'd you do?
Pretty. I mean, 154, which I think is okay. I think that's kind of around the ballpark that most people had. From what I could tell, the scores were kind of all grouped, unless you had Rooney like Blayne did. Then he kind of got knocked down to I think the 130 level. Then everyone else is like 154, and then if you were lucky enough to have Blessing, then you went to that next level. So I was in that mid level. I had gambled on Maxi Morales as a captain, which didn't backfire terribly, although Vela was the better captain. But I'm so far down in the standings, I'm like, screw it. Take a chance. And once I saw Columbus' lineup and that Jossie was not in the 18 and Pedro wasn't, it's worth a shot. It's got some upside. And Maxi didn't do too badly in that game. Big disappointments for me. Atuesta only getting 10. I was expecting more from him. Lawrence, I had missed that he wasn't starting, and he only got 2 points over the week, which that's brutal. Then kind of a lot of like so-so, but I mean, I had Segura, I had Tinnerholm, Maxi and Vela and Abear. So, and the good thing is I did have more up from DC United, and he got an assist. So even though DC had a dreadful week, he was able to do a little bit of something.
So I did pretty well this week. I ended up with 170 points, so I was really pleased with that. I also had Pedro Santos in my lineup as a potential Ottaru option, but when I saw him not playing, I swapped him with Royer instead. So that was 12 easy points that I really appreciated right there. I also had Tommy Thompson in my lineup, and I saw that he did not start the first game. There was definitely a lot of rotation for San Jose in the first game, which we'll get to in a second, but I decided I didn't care. I liked Thompson enough that I was going to go ahead and leave him in for banking on the second game. And I probably should have switched to something else, but that would have been moving Thompson out to try to get in another double game week player was going to impact multiple players on my team. So I just said, forget it. I'm fine with that. He got me 6 points. Not horrible, though you'd hope someone that's cost over $7 million would get you a little bit more than that. Otherwise, I was also disappointed in Vaco. I really hoped a little bit more from 7 from him, but again, he also didn't start in that first game, and I was just like, you know what? Whatever that's messing with his players at that point was going to cause too much turmoil, so I just rolled the dice on hoping they had a great second game, and he almost did with that not PK call. But otherwise, I had Vela captain, I had Abear, I had Morales. I also had Awful on my bench, who came in for some good points, and Chris Wondolowski, who came in for some pretty decent points. So no New York defense, but I did have, or New York City defense, but I did have Sean Johnson in the goal. 170 points overall. I feel like that was on It wasn't the highest of the scores. Definitely, I think I was in the top 200 for overall. So 170s and higher were definitely a good place to be this round to see your position rise. I feel like that would be maybe the bottom of the top third if I had to divide it all up. Maybe like Mike and them were saying, sort of those 150s area might have been an average score. Somewhere like 170 and up, or maybe 165 and up was sort of that top third of where you might have been shooting at. But let's go to chat right now and see how you all did. I have to actually turn off my push to talk in order to make some of these moves, so pardon if you get some silence from time to time.
Well, I'll start reading them off then.
Go for it.
We had a lot of kind of the same range. Patrick 159, Liam 160, Charles 163, MDM 147, Jojo 150, Joel 162, Coulter Nunn, who finally got to join us in chat, 174, which
nice,
like the
congrats
highest that I've seen so far. And then Eric Moore with a score with like Blayne 132, Shannon a 136. I think that's all the ones. Oh, Kendrick had a 170, so that's really good.
Yeah.
And then a name that I cannot pronounce, 145. How would you say it? It looks like Kardashian, but it's Karakshian. I know I butchered your name, so you can in live tell me how badly I butchered your name.
Good try, good try. I see some discussion about value right now in chat, so we'll go ahead and mention that. I'm sure some other people are talking. I see people saying they have maybe 119 point some change, and that feels kind of low at this point. I don't know if I'd agree. Maybe it's a little low. I'm sitting close to 123 million myself. Somebody else in chat has 124.3, Patrick Smith. I think if you're around that 120 mark, you should probably find it fairly easy to field a team at this point in the season. There are a few cheaper defenders that are still playing. You've got some few midfielders that are cheaper. I mean, we got Lapalainen and players like that who come in at a budget. And I think around that 127, holy cow. I think around in that 120-ish area, you should still find yourself able to build a team that is definitely acceptable. I've seen weeks that Kyle's put out the actual best 11 fantasy rules wise. 128. You guys just
128.
What are you doing? Sorry, you're throwing me off. But I've seen the teams that Kyle's put out. There've been weeks where a 90 million team has been the best 11 that's out there. So it's definitely possible to build these teams like that. And since you all keep posting these high scores, I'll just have you know that back in the old version of the game, there was one year where I played just for value building when we were doing the old, like, still FPL season, and I did have the highest team value once in this game a few years ago, which means absolutely nothing right now. But like, I feel like we're being shamed in our live chat, and so I just want to throw out there that
yeah, I mean, I have 118.8, so I mean, most of the people in chat have more money than me. But I mean, we've talked about that. Is one of the reasons I've been struggling this year is because I'm like at least like 2 million below, which I mean can make a big difference. Like for this week, that's a difference between Tinnerholm and Chanel for me. So it definitely makes a big difference in quality.
All right, well, let's go a quick review of our head-to-head leagues before we get into our surprising moments of fantasy takeaways, and I definitely want to hear from chat from this. Had some good interactions on Twitter this afternoon about this. Mike, starting with our hosts head-to-head invitational league. Michael, you had a narrow win over Jamie Watson from Minnesota, 154 to your 151, so you squeaked by with that score. Blayne, unfortunately, falls to the power that is Sherry, our top Patreon league scorer, or sorry, she's a top Patreon donor and the top of our invitational league right now, undefeated, 10-0-0. So you just went up against a juggernaut, Blayne, 137 to 150. And then I won the MLS Fantasy Boss Derby. I beat Kyle, who writes the Behind the Numbers articles. So we went head to head, 170 to 151. So doing well right there. So overall, I ended up having the top score in our hosts invitational league with 170. So if you scored less than I did, you are in good company. A lot of the top players in the league got into the 160s and 150s this round, so don't feel bad about that at all. And as I said, Sherry is still the top of our hosts invitational league with a record of 10-0-0. She is perfect. She sent me a great picture of attending a game this week, and I can't wait to have her on the show to give her a chance to brag about how well she's been doing. Moving on to Patreon, we have a shift in the table over at Patreon. We now have a player with a high score with a record of 8-1-0, and that is now Skiles. He has overtaken HG, who drops to second after being dealt his first loss of the season. So that lucky draw for Skiles has let him jump to the top of the chart. Woot, there you go, Ryan, right there. Woot, that is you indeed. So tough competition with all of that. So fun times in the Patreon League as well. Now that that's finished, let's get on to some of the surprising moments and key fantasy takeaways from round 25, because boy, was rivalry week interesting. It was a lot of fun to see these games. So if you're in chat, start throwing out some of your surprising moments right now. And Mike, let's start with you. What was your reaction?
So I think the most surprising moment, especially for fantasy, was Wayne Rooney getting a start. I mean, that pretty much torpedoed DC United's. It seems, and this kind of flows into a takeaway, DC United is really falling apart. Unimpressive performances in this double game week. They got blown out by Philadelphia in their second game. I mean, had it tied against the Red Bulls, but I mean, they really should have done better at home in a big rivalry game. I mean, the week before they lost 1-0 to Vancouver, so that's 3 straight really bad results in a row. They're probably one of the teams that if you're Montreal and Orlando, you're thinking that's the team that I'm going to pass because they're collapsing. Wayne Rooney thinks I think his head is in England. I wouldn't trust anyone on DC United right now. I mean, I don't think any of their players made the dream team from this double game. They're just, so if they can't really do it at a double game week, I'm not going to pick them up. If anything, I'm kind of looking at their.
Blayne, what about you?
Yeah, honestly, this week was kind of what I expected on a few things. Portland losing to Seattle is kind of a shocker to me. Sorry, that's Lily. She's a little tired and doesn't want to lay down yet. El Trafico being a 3-3 game was not a big surprise. I think the way they started that game was a shock to everybody. But Blessing getting 2 goals, he's been on the verge of that all season. Finally put in a really good performance. And then 5 goals from Dallas was maybe a little surprising. I know Houston's been a team in flux a little bit lately, but this was a Dallas team without Pomacall getting 5 goals, which was really nice.
Yeah, I think
that's probably one of the biggest surprises is Pomacall was being on the bench. I mean, I know Dallas is like, oh, it's not a big deal, but when you're suppose one of your star players is on the bench and then they put up 5. Is he going to lose some time after this? Is there going to be some rotation there? That's a really interesting question out of Dallas. And I'll throw another interesting premium midfielder that started on the bench is Pozuelo from Toronto in the Canadian Classique. I've read some concern that maybe Pozuelo doesn't fit with some of the other pieces, so maybe they're just going to use him off the bench. If so, that's a huge blow to his value and something we definitely need to keep a watch on.
Yeah, those are some good takeaways. I will add the San Jose rotation to that, as I mentioned at the top of the show. It was a double game week. We got that. You know that the rotations happened. I didn't expect to see it as heavy with some of these key players, like with Vaco and Thompson and some of those. I thought there would be a little bit more consistency there, but there wasn't. But you just kind of have to roll with it at times. So the San Jose rotation was definitely weird. And Chats picked up a good one that I didn't realize the actual numbers. I know that San Jose has been shooting a lot recently, but I did not realize it was so much with most shots in the game, most shots on target in a game, and most saves in a game records all being set with that San Jose Vancouver, and that was shocking. because I just didn't realize it was that many. I knew it was a lot, but I didn't realize it was that many. And that was definitely a crazy game that I know a lot of us were hoping for maybe some better points from. I will also double down, maybe triple down on the DC United comments, because I had Edward Cunningham from Twitter send out a message, and I was talking about how he didn't expect DC to be just overall futility. And I'm going to talk about that real quick right now, because I don't think that is a take that we've been shy to throw out there, at least on our show, about DC has been struggling. Rooney has not been firing in all cylinders, and it's just the key players aren't performing. So I was not surprised to see DC not do well. The red card, justified red card, was ill-timed. It did not help at all. But DC struggling is not something that I think should be surprising to many of us. Maybe the way in which it happened. The red card is definitely surprising, so I'm right there with Edward and others right there. But I think we've been seeing DC struggling a lot recently, so it is a fantasy bet you can feel better about, or at least if you're going to have some switcheroo options with DC, limit it to one. I mean, you don't go heavy on DC for sure. The Dallas game, I mean, that as I was following it on my phone, I was just like, again, holy cow.
Yeah, I had it on while we were doing laundry, and it was just like every other time, Houston brain dead in defense. I mean, the Dynamo at this point probably needed a total rebuild. That back line is slow and old and not good. I don't know what they're gonna do there. It's kind of, we're just kind of at that point where just some teams are just falling apart, and Houston and DC are the ones that are doing it. I mean, Houston's already fired their coach. I don't know how much longer Ben Olsen will make it. Seems like he's in that job forever, so he'll probably survive. But yeah, I mean, and it was interesting because we saw Ola Kamara come back for DC United, and he had a really pretty goal. It was the one goal they scored. I guess they scored one against Philly. But he doesn't have enough midfield help to make him a viable fantasy option, I don't think. He's not going to get enough chances. Kind of Lucho Acosta, again, has not been really the same since he had that transfer offer from PSG. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason, but for right now, I'm not looking at him. On the other hand, a midfielder I am looking at is Pavone from LA Galaxy. This was my really first good look at him. I know he only kind of flashed in that spurt, with the LA Galaxy having that really good, I would say the really good opening half. Extra time made it sound like it was just the first 20 minutes. But I saw enough out of him that he's someone to definitely look at when the LA Galaxy have a good. Especially right now, he's only 10 million. Certainly doesn't seem to have the skills, and certainly seems to be able to pick Zlatan out. If you can pick Zlatan out, you're going to get a lot of playing time, and you're going to get points. So he's definitely someone to look at, especially considering some of the other prices of other mids. Definitely someone to keep in mind when the Galaxy are a good match.
Yeah, let's move on to our fantasy takeaways. So, chat, if you've got those, start posting those in the chat. I'm going to add at the beginning for fantasy takeaways the value of Columbus players. Mentioned awful last week in my fantasy article, my newsletter that you can subscribe to at MLSsoccer.com. Shameless plug. I also mentioned a as a potential switcheroo option. Both of those players did pretty well last week. Of course, they were going up against Cincinnati, so take that as you will. But cheap players, good off the bench, a bit of an uptick in form. Now, this is not a team you're going to be relying on heavily going forward. You already have Santos, who's doing pretty well also, but you've got some value options right there in Columbus that I would encourage people to look at. I also want to go back to chat for a second. We had, let's see here, who said this? Christian mentioned Latif from LAFC. Latif, I did think is a good fantasy takeaway for this round, especially with some of the potential injury concerns that Mike will get into in our next segment. He's a low price. He's been doing well for the past several weeks. I think he had a couple of goals this week. The week before, I don't think he got really much of anything, and then the 2 weeks before that, I think he maybe got a goal or an assist in each one of those. So he's been getting into the attack definitely more, and is a low value, and I think that could be a good option to look forward to budget-wise if you're looking for LAFC coverage in general. And then this crazy game with Seattle and Portland, like those Cascadia Cups are always wild, but to just see sort of the shift, well, I mean, for that matter, the Toronto-Montreal game, with the shift, we're going to be talking more about Canada in a second, but just to see these shifts and to see Portland be frustrated, and Brian Fernandez frustrated, and Valeri frustrated by just clogging up that middle is really hurting them, and I think that can factor into some of your fantasy decisions for this week for how much of that coverage you may want. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, something we probably ought to mention with Portland is that Brian Fernandez defenses seem to have adjusted him in a little bit after, his torrid start in his first, I guess, 5 games where he scored a goal, to open up for the first 5 games. I think he's only scored 2 goals since, so it seems the defenses have kind of adjusted to him. Also, it seems that Portland's really having trouble at home. They keep dropping odd results at home. I mean, the Sounders team, I know it's a rivalry, and I know they had all the off-the-field stuff. But, I mean, Seattle came in really, really struggling. And, they took it to them and got 2 goals. And, Portland couldn't do much more with that. And I don't think Portland looked good all game. There wasn't really much of a threat that they were going to, for them to, they've gone from, they've got the games in hand, all these games at home. They're going to boost, rocket up the standings and definitely get a home playoff match. And now it's, I'm pretty sure they'll get a playoff match, but it'll probably be on the road. Maybe that suits them better because they're more of that counter-attacking style, but it seems that they've been really struggling at homes to teams that they shouldn't be struggling.
I also want to go back to you talking about Pavone. In one of Matt Doyle's articles this week, he mentioned that Zlatan and Pavone are in at least his conversation for top 5 or maybe at least top 10 of best MLS offensive pairings ever. So I think that's quite a statement with only, 3 games under Pavone's belt at this point. Not too many. But I mean, that's what he gets paid the big bucks for. Make the hot takes, get the people talking.
Is that Bobby or Matt?
That was Doyle. But I think that does speak to what you were saying, Mike, and what you had observed, that there is a connection there with Zlatan and Pavone that could pay off fantasy-wise as well. Quickly going to mention a question that Ted Firestone sent to us, another Patreon subscriber. Wanted to know which teams that we think have thrown in the towel. And I've actually carved out a little bit more for this question coming up in our housekeeping. But specifically, he wanted to know about Vancouver, Houston, Cincinnati, Colorado, D.C. I think a few of those teams definitely are. We mentioned this last week. Looking at which teams have made the playoffs is going to be crucial into knowing which ones have thrown in the towel or which ones still have something to play for, especially teams that are playing for a home field advantage in the playoffs may still be having more skin in the fight, that even if they've already made it, than some of the teams who are definitely on the bubble and are going to be playing an away game. So doesn't necessarily mean, though, that teams have thrown in the towel, but you may start seeing more rotations and more younger players getting time in the field. So take that what it might be. We got a comment from Patrick here saying that one of the commentators in the FCC game said that they're basically just playing for their jobs next year. Yes, I heard that multiple times. Yes, it is also true. Expect a massive shakeup. And you know what? Just to get a little bit of the bitterness off my chest, I am so happy that everyone down in St. Louis is going to have, a year to get ready to come into Major League Soccer. That must be such a great feeling. And that's just so nice for them. But Blayne's back. Blayne, do you have any quick fantasy takeaways to give us before we move on? The last question, I have one last question before we do, but any takeaways from you?
Despite all the hard times DC has had, Ola Kamara scored.
true.
Yeah.
That's true. He did.
He's good. Hopefully DC gets him a midfielder that can, because I think they'll do something next year. But I just don't think Areola is enough, and that's right now. That's all they. Lucho just keeps no showing.
Well, Ariola's been playing as a second forward, so that's kind of, if they're going to a 4-4-2, it's either him or Quincy. Maybe you move him back, but no, I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if they bench Rooney and just let Kamara play.
That is quite the take. That is quite the take. I mean, that'll definitely happen for this next week since they have no choice thanks to the red card. So we'll see how that plays out for them. All right, last question I have for you all and for chat. Had this come through on Twitter. I thought it was interesting. Do you all find that it's harder to make big moves in either your overall fantasy ranking or in your head-to-heads because of all the number of double game weeks? Either one of you guys, what do you think?
Yeah,
Chat
I think
is saying
so.
yes. Chat is agreeing with you.
Yeah, I mean 100%. I mean, because you end up narrowing on a few players. Like, everyone had Vela, everyone had Maxi Morale. You know, wasn't a whole lot of differentiation, and even the differentiation, which players, you know, did you want to have the keeper for New York City or the defender for New York City? It's not that same kind of variance that we see on a single game week. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely been an issue this year. You know, I mean, I know I've struggled a lot this year because of budgets and issues in the beginning of the year, but there's just not a whole lot when it's like, okay, I'm gonna sit down. All right, well, all right, Montreal and Vancouver again. So I don't even have you know, this is kind of an awful double game week. But I mean, most double game weeks, you know, you can pretty much pick the first 8 people in your team that you've got to have because you're gonna have the best players from the double game week team.
For sure.
It's just tough to make your difference, and your differences are going to be a point or two. You can't have as many wild swings. I mean, every once in a while, there's like, okay, this captain pick made a huge difference, or going this team over this team, it's a huge double game. For the most part, that just hasn't happened.
You in agreement, Blayne?
Yeah, and I think we've had 1 or 2 double game weeks this year where it's been 8-10 teams, and all of them are the heavy hitters. A lot of times we get a couple of really good teams playing, and so we load up 6 players right there, and then the rest of them are just kind of so-so where you're contemplating not taking your full allotment of double game week players. Like this week is a great example. Like, I don't know if you want to go 6 deep on a double game week this week. And so that puts us back to a single game week, but we've had this with every double game week where, you know, this week if you don't take 6, you know pretty much everybody who's going to be taken anyway, and you just kind of hedge your bets and go with that. And that's been the whole season, really, is just bad double game week mixes to pick from. So it's kind of shuffled us all into one set way of picking that we're all used to.
Yeah, it's a unanimous in chat. Everybody agrees that it is harder with the double game week. So I actually don't think I went back a few weeks ago to look at this. I don't think the number of double game weeks has really changed that much over the past few years. So maybe this feeling has not changed either. What I did not look at though was if the number of teams playing during those double game weeks has changed. So I don't know if maybe you usually average maybe 3 or 4, and now we're averaging closer to 7 or 8 teams or so. 7 or 8 games versus 3 or 4 games. So it's definitely interesting. I do want to push back a little bit and say I think there is still some room for team variance. I know we do our best to try to cover a wide range of players when we're talking about this, but I do think there are still some tendencies for people to lean towards certain players. Definitely, we're partly to blame for that as well, I would say, with the advice that we give out. And I do like, I think what Patrick was saying in chat, that it's usually just going to be maybe 1 to 3 players that are sort of your differentials each week. So, but yeah, interesting. It was an interesting question. I wanted to throw it out for chat, wanted to throw it out to you guys. And of course, if you're listening later on with the podcast on SoundCloud or iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, shoot me a message at MLS Fantasy Boss. Let me know what you think about double game weeks and how that impacts your fantasy scoring and just in general. But I mentioned that we were going to be talking about Toronto, and sorry, not just Toronto. Toronto is not going to we're going to be talking about Canada. Canada is what we're going to be talking about because we have one team on a double game week this week, and that means this round we're moving into our Patreon housekeeping section right now. This round starts on Wednesday, August 28th at 8:00 p.m. with Montreal versus Vancouver. So we're going to be talking about the lone double game week this time, our lone Canadian double game week in just a second. Of these two double game week teams, Vancouver has one away game, one home game, but Montreal has a double home game week this round. So pretty mediocre double game lineup, I must say, but it could have some interesting impacts in team building. Nobody's on a bye, and if you're looking for switcheroo options, you can definitely look at Minnesota and RSL as potential sources for those cheap 4.0 players to be able to work them into your team to give you the flexibility that you may need to make a budget that's a little bit lower, go a little bit farther, and to just get your switcheroos and auto-roos activated. So we got that set up. Sorry, I'm just looking through chat for a second. Had an alert pop up. We had someone Ted mentioned about teams that are throwing in a towel. I went through 538.com real quick, and I got some of their playoff picture stats right here. So LAFC is the only team that has clinched a spot in the playoffs. Don't expect them to let their foot off the gas, though. May have some resting, but I wouldn't expect too much resting as they really want to sink it home about how good they are, break those records, and just cement themselves as the top team. Atlanta, New York City FC, and Philadelphia all have a 99% chance to make the playoffs, so they're pretty much golden right there. It's just going to depend if they're going to fall into a 2 or a 3 spot overall. So those are pretty much the 4 teams. Other teams are like 94, 96%, but we're just going to go with these 99s and up right now. Those are the 4 teams that are solidly in the playoff picture right now. They're going to be playing for those home field advantages, except for LA already hasn't. But the other teams will be playing for home field advantage, so don't expect them to throw in the towel, as there's still something for them to get for this playoff picture. The teams that are basically out, and basically out is me saying that they have a less than 1% chance to make the playoffs. That is FC Cincinnati, Vancouver, and Colorado. So if any team is going to look like it's going to start throwing in a towel, it's going to be these 3 teams. You may start seeing some rotation. The Cincinnati guys, of course, are playing for their jobs, literally, so they may be putting out all they can with the A lineup. But I'd expect some new coaches in 2 of these teams to start doing some experimentation with lineups, and we can see how that looks. So those are the 3 teams that I would expect to have the most variance over the coming weeks. Do you guys disagree?
No, I mean, I think that's about right. I mean, we saw, Columbus rotate a midweek game against New York City. I think that's exactly the kind of stuff that you'll see.
Yeah, and Columbus is right there, too. They're like a 1% chance. There's a couple teams that are right there, very, very low. I'm just covering the 99% teams and the less than 1% teams. You can check it out at 538 for the MLS coverage, the predictions they have right there to see some of that, some more of those stats.
And one thing I'll add is that, Colorado's been pretty much done since April, so it's not anything new to them. It's just a matter of and the other thing about Colorado is they just hired a coach, Robin Fraser, who I guess will be taking over this week. So I'm not as worried about them throwing in the towel, because for them it's all about, new guys here. I need to make a good impression to make sure I get my job. So that situation seems a little bit different than some of the other ones. I mean, Cincinnati's new coach just came in, so I mean that'll be kind of a similar situation. Guys trying to impress a coach, and that's pretty much all they have.
All right, well, let's move on, Mike, to your injury report. So tell us what this looks like for round 26.
All right, well, let's talk about midweek fixtures that are not part of the fantasy game. I think for the last time this year, fingers crossed on that. But that is the U.S. Open Cup final happens Tuesday night against Atlanta United is hosting Minnesota United. I would expect both teams to play A-plus lineups. Neither team has won that competition before. So should be an interesting game. Check that to make sure about injuries and whatnot. As far as big injuries or impact, for the double game week teams, really not that many instances, except for the coach, because something we have not talked about on this podcast yet is that Remy Gard is out as Montreal Impact coach and was replaced on Thursday with Wilmer Cabrera. I don't know why they did that, but they did it. So we might see some new rotation of players from Montreal, some unexpected things. So that's something to be aware of. Obviously, we talked about Wayne Rooney's red card, and it's going to carry over into this week. Stephen Goff with the Washington Post has already reported that Disco is extending that suspension, so he will miss the game against Montreal, which is the second part of that double game week. Another red card suspension to affect the double game week players is Ronald Matarrita got a red card for a headbutt. I would assume that suspension will stick, so that means he'll miss the game for Vancouver's second game. Excuse me. I don't know if there were a whole lot of red cards. I mean, we talked about Tarek's red card. I don't think that he'll get an additional suspension for that because that was just 2 yellows and probably shouldn't have gotten the first one. I think that's it. There's not a whole lot of other big injuries, but those are the ones to keep in mind for the double game. Excuse me. I mentioned forgot the biggest. Vela came off at 60 minutes with a hamstring. MRI was supposedly due today. I've been updating on Kevin Baxter's feed. Haven't seen anything. I would be kind of shocked if they rushed him back. Usually hamstrings are a 2-week injury. But then again, I've been kind of confused by why Bob Bradley played Carlos Vela 90 minutes in a blowout win at San Jose. So, shrugs here, but I would be very cautious with Vela, depending on what the news is.
Charles just popped into chat for us. He's an Impact fan. He said Cabrera, Camacho, and Raitala didn't practice today. So that's huge for their defense right there, missing players. And I saw it on MLS today, and Charles mentioned it as well. Rod Fanny just re-signed with the Impact. He was with them in 2018. They didn't pick up his option this year, but they just signed him back to the squad. So either these injuries are piling up and they're grabbing an emergency defender for this midweek match, or with Diallo leaving in the transfer window, their defense is kind of up a creek right now. So this may be a time to look at that as the first game, second game, picking against their defense may be good right now.
Yeah, that's crazy with Vela, and I don't know, 2 weeks for a hamstring seems a little early for me, but I guess it depends on if it's actually like a sprain or just soreness or what. But those can be pretty lengthy recoveries. So, but
well, and there's an international break coming up, so I mean it may end up actually being 3 weeks. I don't remember what LAFC's schedule during the international break is. I feel like they've played a bunch of games, so they may. I don't think they're one of the teams that is playing a lot during that break. I mean, for them, when we saw it last night, why, what I mean? I mean, wouldn't be surprised if it's, but obviously it's going to be something that we're all really interested in because LAFC is going to be playing Minnesota, and Minnesota has that midweek Open Cup game. So, I mean, they're going to be, Minnesota's got a long week ahead of it, flying down to it, and then I don't know if they'll fly back to Minnesota in the meantime, but then they've got to go all the way across country. So LAFC is definitely a team, if Vela was 100% really so.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike, for that injury update. We've got a lot of Montreal talking going on right now. We'll get to that in just a second. If you're just now joining us, welcome. We're getting ready to talk about our Round 26 previews and our ESPN Plus Round 26 player preview section. Starting out like we always do. Guys, who do you think has the best fantasy match for points this week? And are there any players that are a hard pass for you? Blayne.
Good question this week. I think there's a lot of wide open matches here. Honestly, for points, the way the two teams are playing right now, I'm going to go with the Philadelphia-Atlanta game. I think this is a lot of potential for offense being in Philly. and with Atlanta playing the midweek game, you could see some rotation on the back end, or you'll see some tired legs. Philly is on the upswing, and Atlanta's defense on the road isn't quite as strong as it is at home. I just think this is one that could see 4 or 5 goals easily.
Mike.
I mean, I mentioned LAFC. I think regardless of whether or not Vela's there, I think that's a good one. FC's Dallas against Cincinnati. I mean, pick any team against Cincinnati, you're probably in a good spot. And then the other one, Vancouver against New York City. But I mean, I think for New York City, I mean, New York City's looked pretty good. It's one of the few weeks where they don't have a double game week. We just saw Vancouver give up a record number of shots to San Jose. I feel like this might be a game where Dome Torrent just throws on Parks, Hebert, and Tati and says, "Go have fun, boys." So I could definitely see a lot of goals.
Anybody that you're a hard pass on? Either one of you.
I should have mentioned. I mean, Piatti's hurt, so I mean, he's someone you normally look at for a Montreal week.
Let me change this question. Are you a hard pass on Vela with his injury concerns and playing the last round of the week?
I was just going to say, you've got 2 options here. You either have to take a hard pass on Vela at 15 million, or you have to look at potentially a cheaper option for LAFC that you can roll Vela into. Say, drop him down to Rossi, who will be getting a lot more time, and upgrading a midfielder to somebody like a Blessing or something who's going to be getting more. Otherwise, I don't think you can risk it on Vela if the hamstring injury news doesn't come out that he's cleared to play and he's back in practice full speed this week. You can't leave 15 million down and a downgrade for that much on the bench and not use that money. So you either got to have a plan to remove Vela and upgrade a player and replace him with somebody who's going to get the minutes there, or just take a hard pass.
So the final question before we get into it, again, lots of conversation going on in our chat, and I promised all of our Canadian listeners that we were talking Canadian teams tonight. Let's do it right now. Montreal, Vancouver. Is this a double game week where the double game week players might not be as attractive as a single game week players? Blayne.
Yes and no. My first draft is what I'm looking at right now, and I have 6 players from the double game week. So
Holy crap!
First draft, I went all in with 6 players. I think there is some value, especially on some of the cheaper options. I think the matchups we're seeing leave a lot open to discussion and interpretation, but I think you can potentially make a solid case for 6 players here this week.
Mike, what about you?
I have 5 right now. And it really just comes down to, well, you know, Vancouver has. I'm mostly just loaded up my bench. Like, bench is has Nowitzki, Reyna, and Lapalainen. Sorry to spoil some of my picks, but that's kind of thinking is to kind of see what that happens. And I have switcheroo so that like at least one will come in, and then I can kind of play with it, and I'll go into that. Although I'm reading Charles say that Bush might rotate this week, according to Wilman Cabrera.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Which that's a big deal for me because I mean I was kind of enjoying the $5 million keeper, but I mean the plus side for these players is a lot of them are on the cheaper side. You know, especially some of the Vancouver defender. You know, and I could definitely see that Montreal Vancouver game being like a 0-0. So it could also be like a 1-1. You know, it's kind of there's not a whole lot of good scoring on either side. So, and this kind of gets into the comment back in the double game week. There hasn't been a whole lot of steady defenses. There's not a whole like that one team like, all right, these guys are going to grind out clean sheets. I mean, probably the best team defensively is like maybe LAFC, but
Sure.
Atlanta, and I mean Atlanta's on the road against Philly, so they're not a good pick this week either. So I don't mind kind of throwing some of those defenders to kind of their mutual offensive inept will result in some clean sheets and then some extra double game. You know, for the price points, it's not too bad. So that's kind of where I'm thinking of. Also, I think both of them play relatively early. Well, I mean, Vancouver is the late game on Saturday, but you've got both Sunday games to. So if you want to throw some extra money in, you can really do some switcheroos pretty almost all.
I think you all are crazy. I'm more over here with JoJo and Nano, who are saying like I've got 3 players right now for my double game week. I think this is totally a double game week where you do not have to worry about going all in. You're exactly right in that the double game week players this round are better suited for your bench as switcheroo and auto-roo options. You're probably still going to want to have at least one of those guys on your starting team, and I think we all may have a similar one who might be that. But the Bush news is huge because I think a lot of people were considering having Bush as their keeper, at least in a keeperoo, because Montreal does play a fairly early game, gives you at least 4 or 5 teams as home teams as a switcheroo option for a keeper. But that's huge news as far as that goes. I think you could easily pivot a Bush to a defender and not have much of a loss. Maybe go with Vancouver's keeper instead if you're just winning those points. But don't forget that a double game week is only about 1.5 times more points. It's not double points. So I think with 2 teams, one that's on the bubble playing for their life, which is Montreal, and one that's pretty much less than 1% chance, is pretty much out of it for the playoffs. I don't think this is a week that you need 6 players from the double game week teams. But we'll see. If you haven't chimed in on chat already, please do. Let us know if you're thinking how many players, double game week players, you're thinking of having. We're going to move on now to talking about which players we are targeting. And as always, starting with keepers, defenders, and clean sheet chances. Blayne.
Yeah, I do have Bush, but that rotation risk could do that. I think if he starts the first game, I'm going to risk it and go with it. He may be on the bench so he can see the second game. But at 5 million on a double game week, you got to go with it. And Christian Ward just put it in chat. If a defender gets a 4 and a 3 on the week, that's 7 points. You're looking at a clean sheet or a ton of bonus points for a single game week player to match that. So we've got some names out there like if you don't have a couple of defensive options here, at least on your bench, especially with their prices, I think you're missing it here. I think you should be able to find 3 guys for at least for your bench right here. And let me switch screens really quick. And yeah, so I go with my first lineup with Bush at keeper. I've got Adnan as at 7.1, but he's been getting forward, and the new news that Montreal's defense may be a little patched together makes that pick even stronger. And then I've got Nerwinski at 4.6. He's been starting frequently. It's really hard to pass up a double game week defender at that price. If Bush doesn't go, I may roll into one of the Montreal defenders and save a little bit of money on some of the other guys I've got back here, like Ziegler, who is 8.6 and takes penalties for Dallas. I think that's a huge piece right there. I also liked Hollingshead this week, but he's at 9 point something. I mean, ridiculous price. And with some of my other options, I couldn't fit him in there.
Let's talk about that real quick, though. We had 2 different opinions of that come in from Twitter. Kevin Redmond said that the prices are ridiculous for defenders. And then we had Leanne who came in who said that she thinks that the more expensive defenders are finally starting to prove to be worth their price. You seem to be leaning more towards Kevin.
Well, I went with Ziegler, who takes the penalties at 8.6 because I couldn't fit Hollingshead in. My very first draft is I was just grabbing all of my want-to-have players in there, included Hollingshead. The way he plays, the way he gets assists, and sometimes scores going up against FC Cincy, I don't think he's going to... I think he'll live up to his price, let's put it that way. He is a guy I would trust in this game at that price. He would be in my lineup, and he may still be in my lineup. When we get to the forwards, I will have some extra money coming because I'm going to have to drop Vela out. He was in my lineup because I didn't realize he had that hamstring injury. So if I get the extra money and I can work it, I'm going to go with Hollingshead over Ziegler. I probably can't afford both, but yeah, some of those super premium defenders right now I do feel are worth it. To maintain your value in this score system we currently have means you have to be consistently putting up points. Otherwise, you start dropping 300 to 500,000 each week, each bad game, and you have to do something to keep going up in value and to maintain this price for a long period of time. So the guys that are up there are proving that they can do it week in and week out.
Mike.
So all right. So I have Bush as defensively. I have Daniil Henry. He's actually been a pretty decent bonus point generator. So at 5.7, I liked him more than Adnan, who's been a little really hot and cold for me. At a 7.1, it just wasn't worth it for me. I'm not taking the same tact as Blayne. I don't feel like Montreal's defense is particularly susceptible. Those players have been kind of injured for a lot of the time. And for me, the way I'm looking at it is Vancouver and DC right now are really, really bad. So I don't mind going Montreal defenders because both of those offenses are inept. Other defenders, I also have Nowitzki. I do agree with Blayne, 4.6. You can pass him up. I have him on my bench. As far as other starters, I have Chanot. Again, Vancouver, offensive ineptitude. And then I have Ziegler for exactly the same reasons that Blayne does, which is that I can't afford
Well, I can't afford Hollingshead, and so I did have him on my team. Sorry. But so here's my thought. I definitely agree. Let me switch to the screen again. I definitely agree with what Krishna was saying about you get a 4, you get a 3, that's going to add up to a 7, can be harder for a single game week player to score. You could also end up getting a 2 and a 2. You could also end up getting a 1 and a 2. So you could end up with just 3 points, depending on how those games go, especially for Vancouver. And if Montreal is in shambles in the background for Montreal with that, maybe you get lucky and do get the shutout in the first one, or maybe it's a 1-1 draw in the first one. So my next thought then becomes, you just roll the dice and get some of the cheap guys. Maybe you're pushing me to 4 players now if I'm going to go with a defender from each team and then 2 midfielders, or a defender, someone from the defensive unit. But do you just say, forget that, I'm going to go with the offensive defenders. Get those guys who are putting in crosses, putting in key passes, and forget bonus points and a clean sheet. I'm going for a goal. I'm going for an assist to add that on there. So when I was looking at players, I'm looking at people like Ryan Hollingshead, for one, and I did have that budget for him. I'm looking at people like maybe Graham Zusi going up against a Houston team that just did not do very well in their big derby. Got some history there with Sporting Kansas City as well. Again, I'm looking at Tommy Thompson, another kind of expensive guy, but has been able to get up in the past. So I think those are some of the players. Maybe even look at Betashore over at LAFC if you've got the money. These are guys with an offensive flair that could pay off in a single game week situation and bridge that gap quicker with some of those double game week guys, especially since they're below average defenses with potential keeper rotations and poor defensive histories in general. So that's where my head was. If you are still looking for some value and you do want some of those more traditional center back guys, I'm also going to throw out a non-double game week player, Smith over at Sporting Kansas City. I think he's jumped to the top of that depth chart there. Blayne, you can chime in to that, but I think there's a sub $6 million guy that could also work if you're looking for a cheap player that I think's probably got a pretty good shot at a clean sheet this week.
Yeah, Smith is ahead of Fontas in the depth chart right now. He is behind Barat, but Barat's been injured lately, and Smith's been playing really well with Beasler, so I don't know that Vermes is going to break up that chemistry right now.
And let me just add that I also think Christian makes another good point. Christian, we're just going to have you on the show sometime, so hit me up. Makes another good point that on top of all that, the problem with some of these Montreal and Vancouver defenders is you could see price drops. And if you are having some budget woes at this point of the season, that could be a pretty big hit. So, all right. Well, there we go. Some great chat. I think we got a good coverage right there with the double game week people or not. I will say that my defense is definitely in flux right now because I agree with some of what's been said earlier. Defense has been blah this entire season. It's been hard to find guys. And as far as that question about are they too expensive, I fall somewhere in between. I do find that these defenders, as they get over $8 million, I'm thinking, dang, am I really going to have to pay that much for a defender? That's a lot for what they're producing. But then again, lots of them are producing, so I can't argue too much if their averages are working out. But it's interesting at times for sure. Let's move on to midfield. Who are you thinking, Mike?
All right, so I think the guy that we all have this week. He's been a consistent bonus point producer despite Montreal's struggles, despite not having Kiati. So definitely someone to have on your team. Rounding out, I have Barrios from S. Pick offensive players against Cincinnati. Pick any kind of Cincinnati. And then I have Maxi Morales. I figure Vancouver it's not just against San Jose. Vancouver's been letting up a lot of shots, which means Maxi Morales opportunities for, through balls and stuff that'll get him offensive bonus points. So he'll continue to rack up good points. And then I have Reina from Vancouver on the bench. He's a decent bonus point producer, but at 8.1, I figure over the double game. We'll see if he can string something together to make him, push on to the actual. Oh, and then I do have one more. I bench as well. He's been really hot or cold, so we'll see if he has a hot against either of these two really bad opponents.
Blayne, what about you?
Mike, who was that last pick? I didn't catch the name.
Lapa.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because he's on my bench too. I've got Reina and Lapalainen just like Mike does. They're both bench players right now for me. I think you should roll the dice with them. I've got 3 forwards in, so I'm good with having a couple of midfielders on the bench. And I've got a few spots where I could really upgrade some of my other players if one of these guys hits and I drop out one of the other guys that's in my list. So I've got Tider starting. I'm going to roll with it. He's been doing well enough, and I think you got to take it at this week, 2 home games, just go with it. And then I've got Heel and Gutierrez from Kansas City this week right now. I didn't quite have the budget for Maxi Morales. He's on my short list of players that I would try to bring in. Pedro Santos is also on the list of guys that if I had a little bit more budget, I might look at upgrading from Gutierrez to one of those guys. But Houston's been struggling and been giving up goals, and Gutierrez this last week he didn't have it quite so much, but he has been one of the focal points of the attack lately and seems to be getting some of the better midfield play. Johnny Russell as a winger is another guy that I kind of contemplated, but I like the way Gutierrez is playing through the midfield right now. And then with everything going on in Toronto, I think he might be one of those borderline must-own players. He's been tearing up teams playing at home. If Pozuelo's not playing, that's just one less piece for New England to worry about and a little bit more of the ball for their guys. And I think he's earned his $13 million price tag right now.
For sure, agree. Definitely, yeah. Heel was one of the players I added. One of my first 5 players. Also have Tider. I think that he was that easy go-to pick for Montreal, being in your starting lineup. You guys have hit a lot of the main players. I'm just going to throw out a couple other names. Without Vela, if you're still looking for some LAFC coverage, you might consider Blessing. 9.9, that sub 10 million point. He's had good returns over the past 4 weeks that I already talked about at the top of the show. Could be seeing some more action. Of course, you always got to talk about Rossi and the other guys that are going to be at Tuesta K that are always coming up at that. But I think Blessing could be a good pick if you're wanting some of that coverage. For Montreal, I know we've said Lassie has been good. He played out there on the left wing this last round. I'm looking at Bohan. That's what I'm looking at. Playing up there up top. He's a midfielder. He's a midfielder in the game, playing up top as a forward in actual reality. 7.3. I think that with that double game week, both at home Vancouver, DC, it's a good lineup. Some teams that aren't as strong. I think that we could see some good stuff from Bohan. He's listed in the game as Kirkic, Krkic, BKRKIC. So that's who we're talking about if you hear the name Bohan being thrown around. Otherwise, I think you guys have named a lot of them. I think that, let's see here, some of the... Sorry, I've lost my train of thought because I had to switch screens again. Going through there, yeah, Pedro Santos is a good shout for Columbus if you want to. I think there may be some better options, though. You could look over at Philadelphia. My worry is, depending on how Atlanta is going to play against Minnesota or what's still left in their gas tank, that even players like Monteiro or some of their, or Silno, something like that, may not be as great. FC Dallas, like you said, Blayne, is just, like, take your pick of who you're really looking forward to. If Palmacul's playing, maybe he's one you consider, but I think Barrios is probably the top pick from that. And the same reasons that I was thinking about Zusi as a defender are the same reasons I think you look at the Sporting Kansas City midfielders as an option, that this Houston has not been playing well at all. So the one team that's kind of a weird curveball for me this week is the New York Red Bulls, and that is because Colorado did just get their new coach. So I think it's going to be hard to predict how they play up against the Red Bulls, and I don't like these unknown situations for fantasy in general. You may catch that if this is the first time you're listening to a show. You may probably have it, but those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that when new players come in or these new situations come up, I tend to lean towards the conservative side of I don't have information to know how to expect them to react to this. So that I could see why you might want to go with a Red Bull player at this point, but that's just, there's an unknown there for me with Colorado, so I don't know. I would also agree, Mike, I think New York City FC has the best away chance of any of the teams this round, so Morales is a pretty good, maybe differential pick this week. Let's get on to our forwards. Blayne.
Yeah, so Vela was kind of my headliner to start this, but knowing that he's injured, I'm dumping him out of the lineup right now. I still like that game. I think I'll probably go with Rossi if Vela's not playing. I may just put Rossi in there and just roll with it, but this new guy Rodriguez looked really good, and so he may come in and try to play the weekend game, and Rossi may not, but that's an easy swap to make. And then I've got Ferreira for Dallas at 6.5. I kind of want to see that lineup too, just to know who's going to play. I know there's been some rotation. I know I'm not even going to try to butcher the name. Their one TAM player, designated player, finally scored.
Andrasic.
And scored huge.
Andrasic.
Like that. Yeah, so I mean, I think there could be a little bit of rotation risk there. There could be a little bit of question in the lineup, so definitely watch that if you're looking at this one. But I like what I've seen from Ferreira playing so far this season. I think he's going to be the guy they go with, but recent form may change that. They seem to be a team that's rotating quite a bit right now, so watch that. But whatever forward's up there, I'm going to be grabbing. And then I've got Tati Castellanos from New York City in this one. I don't trust the Vancouver defense fully, and he's just been on fire. I think, what is it, Mike? 5 goals in 4 games. I'm going to ride him while he's hot and just throw him in there at $8 million. It's not a huge risk, and he might be one of those first guys dropped if one of my midfielders in the switcheroo really hits it big.
Mike.
Yeah, right now I have Vela in. I'm basically doing that as a placeholder to make sure I have the money for Vela, depending on what the injury diagnosis is. That is not the case. I mean, I guess I would probably switch to Rossi, but I would think about who would go in there. Maybe even switching to Bo for New England against Toronto. We'll have to see, because then I have a lot of money to play around. I do also have Andrasic. Right now I have him on the starting spot, 5.5. He's kind of have as a thought in case the Vancouver players on my bench do super well. I'll just scrub them out. But I have Hebert instead of Tati, pretty much on the thinking of Hebert getting shots. Hebert is such a clinical finisher. I still think, even though Toddy does have the better price point, I'm willing to spend a little bit more for Hebert, who's been a little bit more consistent. So that's kind of my thinking there. Should also mention in chat, Charles keeps ruining our day.
No
He's
doubt.
speculating that Tyder possibly has a calf injury. So I don't know. I haven't been able to track that down on Twitter, but obviously sometimes watching games could give you a better idea about who might be injured than anything else. Be aware about that, because that would be a big bummer. So yeah, because I think we all had like Tyder and Bush, so those are the two players that Charles thinks may be injured. So be aware.
Let me just say, Charles is ruining our day, but is also the MVP of chat tonight, because we have not been able to see some of these notifications from Montreal, either just overlooking them through sheer Twitter flood or them not being available. So, Ty Dare not being available.
And it's harder to get Montreal because half of it's in.
True. Half of it is in French, and none of us speak French, and I feel like that is more your fault than ours, being from Louisiana.
It is my. It is.
For
my
sure.
grandmother spoke French. I should speak French.
How dare you? I have a little bit of difference with my forwards. Again, another position that's still kind of in flux, especially with all the crazy Montreal news that we are getting. Without Vela in my lineup, I feel like I can get the coverage I want by moving over to Blessing instead of having to get a Rossi, and I think I can still get some LA coverage. That's just so late in the round, and we'll just see what happens. Minnesota can be a team that bunkers up and cuts out those chances in the 18, and if Vela doesn't play, that could be frustrations for LAFC. And since they have clinched it, maybe that's a game they just say, whatever, we don't really have to worry about it. Let's just not lose. Try to get a point or whatever, play off a counter. For me, that puts Bo near the top of my list of players who I want. The problems in Toronto, some of the form that New England's been on, I like that. So I've got Bo as a lineup there. I also have Andrasic from Dallas in my lineup. Definitely want to see who they play against FC Cincinnati, but I have little faith in what's happening at FC Cincinnati right now, and I think that Dallas, coming off this 5-goal scoreline, is definitely going to have a flood of form, a tsunami of form for themselves to ride, and Andrasic was involved in a lot of that last week, and I think that's going to be great momentum for him if he does get the starting spot. And then right now, and this one, I'll be honest with you, is the most tentative spot as a forward option that I have right now. A lot of it's based on his production over the past 3 or 4 rounds, but I have Shibilko in my lineup. Philadelphia's been doing very well. I'm not sure what Atlanta will look like with the Open Cup game. I'm assuming they're going to go all in for that to see if they can get that win, so there could be some rest. Atlanta, though, is fighting for a spot to get a home game, so that against Philadelphia. So this is a huge game for them nonetheless. So that could be a reason going for Shibilko as well. But that is probably the one I am not as confident on. Not sure who I pivot to really at this point, but Shibilko is my third forward right now. All right, let's go down to captains. Who do you have, Blayne?
I have no idea at this point. The ACV reference was there, but that's definitely out the window now. My fallback was going to be tighter on the double game week, but that one may be out the window now with potential injury. I'm a big fan of captaining double game week players whenever you get a chance. I think it was Christian or Charles, one of them again, said Lassi's home form has been insane, like a 13 and a 14 in his last 2 home games. So with them playing a double home game, even if you take a 1.5 of that, you're still looking at 20-something points and doubling that. So Lassi could go up there if I'm looking at a double game week player that I'm pretty sure is going to get 2 games. Otherwise, it's probably heel for New England.
Mike.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same realm as Blayne. kind of struggle if Titer really is out. Because it would definitely be tighter if he does play. But if he doesn't right now, my gut instinct is to throw it on Maximum. I know he won't burn me too. I don't kind of trust as much as the upside as a lot of these players have. I don't really trust them with the armband. But maybe I'll just do something weird because I'm way behind anyway and just want to have like great week 1 week.
So I agree some with you, Blayne. With Tight Air being questionable, my armband easily goes to Carlos Heel as the player who I like for that. I'm gonna say right now in the podcast what I responded to in chat about Lassi Lapanainen and Bohan with starting. It is true that Lassi got a 14 in round 21 when he was home against Philadelphia, and he got a 15 in round 24 when he was home against FC Dallas. When he's been away, he's gotten nothing better than 2 points. So he's also only played 90 minutes once when he's been away. So he's been in the league for 5 games at this point. Bohan, on the other hand, has only been available for 3 weeks so far. So he's only overlapped with Lassi for 1 home game, and that was the FC Dallas game in round 24. He played 61 minutes in that game. I don't have the lineup available to me right now. And then at that away game to Toronto, which happened last week, Bohan got the goal. So I think that 14-point game is an outlier some for Lassi, especially since he only has 1 other double-digit game there, and that Bohan was not getting those full 90s. So if Bohan goes full 90 against Vancouver and DC this week, I still like him over Lassi Lapanainen, mostly because he is playing in that advanced forward position, and I think he'll be a target. So both are good players. Both are good options. I like them both this week, but I just want to throw that out there to show some of the overlap of these 2 players. And then I said Carlos Heel, right, for my captain. I did that. Okay.
Yeah, you did.
Good. All right. Well, that's all that we have for the show tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for joining us in chat. As always, we'll hang around for a little bit after the recording is finished to talk to people in chat. So if you are listening to us, that's another little perk you get if you do join us. And let's finish up with plugs. Blayne.
Nothing from me.
Mike.
2 things. First of all, New York is blue. Second of all, congrats to River Ridge for winning the Little League World Series tournament. I actually live in River Ridge, so that's a team that's a few blocks away that just won the title. So it's really cool. Big party down here, which I mean everything's a big party down here. But now we have another excuse to do it in the end of August. So congrats to those kids. In fact, my wife teaches 1 or 2 of the kids. So yeah, it's pretty exciting down here. All the signs are going up. Everyone's having a good time.
All right. For myself, tune in. Check out MLSFantasyBoss.com for the other articles that we have posting up there, like the Behind the Numbers article by Kyle that we mentioned at the top of the show. And then please head over, and if you would, subscribe to my MLS Fantasy newsletter over at MLSsoccer.com. And let me know if you have any suggestions for topics that you want to hear each week, because I do want to get content that is catered towards what you all want to hear. So if you want something a bit more involved, in depth, I should say, than what you hear in the podcast sometimes, let me know. Happy to answer those questions and get a little bit more info for you there. Also, be sure to head over to the Discord chat over for MLSFantasyBoss.com. Had some questions about how to get to it. The easiest way is to just go to MLSFantasyBoss.com, and in the sidebar as you scroll down, there's an embedded live chat, and you can link to the Discord right there, or you can send a message to me on Twitter or Older Goaler on Twitter, and we can get you hooked up with the chat client right there for Discord. And then don't forget to head over to r/FantasyMLS, the subreddit community. We have Rate My Team articles there. We have weekly rant threads where you can share in the pain and suffering of red cards and poor picks and last-minute changes that don't pan out, along with your fellow managers. So check that out. It's a fantastic community. Thank you so much for tuning in to us. We want to do more of this content,
Reid,
so let us know. Yeah.
I got to interrupt you here. Older Goaler just posted on Discord. Vela sustained minor injury to hamstring, the MRI. Trying to read it really quick. I wanted to get this in the show if we could.
Breaking news.
It's unclear if he'll play this. I mean, as long as he's got any injury to the hamstring, I assume that he does not play.
Sounds good. Well, you heard it here. You heard it here first. If it's tonight and you're in live chat, if you're listening to us on the podcast, heard it third, fourth, or fifth, I guess. I don't know. But there it is. Breaking news from Blayne and older goaler, Vela hamstring injury. So thank you so much for listening tonight, guys, and good luck. All right, so that's our recording. That's
Sorry, I
been.
just wanted to get that in.
No. I'm glad you did. That was
it
perfect to make sure that we get it.
Because I was like switching to it too. And Reid forgot to push.
No, I was typing.
Your mouth was moving.
Was I? I guess I was just saying that was it. I stopped the recording for the podcast, so that's been saved on my computer. Now we're here for a few minutes chat to talk with you guys about other things that we may have forgotten. Valeri versus RSL. Yes, Christian, we totally did not mention that at all. My opinion about Portland is that they've not been on a great run of form recently, even at home. I think some teams have figured out how to shut them down a little bit. And RSL has been doing better without Petke, so I think that will be a tougher game for Portland, and I don't think you need to really get Timbers coverage this week. You could probably pass on Valeri.
Yeah, too much risk with Valeri if they shut him down. And he's got a good ceiling, but I don't trust his floor right now. I would rather have a guy like Pedro Santos for a little bit cheaper against Chicago. I think that's going to be a little bit more consistent scoring player, right?
Well, and that's the thing. He's 12.6. I mean, RSL's a decent enough team where, do you pick Valeri over Max Morales or Bari? I mean, RSL's not a pushover, whereas a bunch of decent option mids do face pushovers. So that's the issue with Valeri. By the way, hi Jared. How's it? Are you Jared from Jesuit High School? I think you are, judging by the profile, man. Just making.
Like scrolling through and finding fellow Louisianans.
Fellow Louisiana.
Yeah.
I'm
So
hoping he's staying dry.
So I couldn't work this into the show, but I thought I'd share this with chat. Rivalry week. Sporting and Minnesota ran with the nicest rivalry in sports hashtag all over Twitter. Mm-hmm. Sporting went so far as during roster announcements, they played the song "You've Got a Friend in Me" when announcing the Minnesota players.
Poor Minnesota is not going to have anyone when St. Because Sporting Kansas City is going to drop them like a bad hat. Pick up St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, we already hate St. Louis, so it's a clash of cultures between Kansas City and St. Louis already. This is going to get really heated really fast. I mean, it already is. I'm pissing off as many St. Louis fans as I can already.
What do you guys think about Erickson? Jojo wanted to know, and for me, he's just so he and Vaco are so frustrating as players because I never seem to hit them at the right time.
Yeah, I went last week, and Erickson definitely had the better week, so that one hurt. It really find a San Jose fan, ask them which one's the better player for the matchup, and go with what they say.
And honestly, Orlando's defense has been kind of sticky, so I don't know if I love that matchup as opposed to other mid. Orlando doesn't do Orlando as good as Orlando is. Well, I don't know if they're as good defensively as they are bad at finishing, but it's pretty close. If they could finish, they would be one of the top 4 teams.
That's a big statement. They are as bad at finishing as they are.
They're almost as good as defending as they are bad at.
Okay, almost as good at defending as they are as bad as finishing. Wow, that's good. That's good. So Blayne has taken the question earlier today when I asked what you all wanted to see more of for 2020, and has made that Lily and has brought her out at like way past her bedtime.
Yes, definitely past her bedtime. Lily, can you wave at everybody? Oh, get that hand up. Wave.
So does Lily have a captain pick this week? Because we could really use a captain.
Lily, who's our captain pick this week? I couldn't make that one out.
I think she said New York is beat.
And Ohio is yellow.
Aww.
Was definitely hoping for a little more. But take a pity goal at the end, I guess. For sure. For sure.
So, chat may not care as much, but you two will be happy. The second Thrawn book hit paperback, so I now have a copy of it.
Nice.
So hopefully I can finish up the first one and get through that one soon.
And we can finish it with our book club. That we're definitely starting at the end of the season.
Yeah, we need to do the book club. It'll get me to read the rest of them.
I think I can swing that. Once the season's over, we can do some test runs of the Star Wars book club. What will the Thrawn books be our first read? Do we just start over with them and go?
Probably depend. Okay, so the season ends the first week of October.
I will be in Japan the second week of October.
Probably shouldn't start
So we'll have an international break.
it.
Yes.
So I guess
we take that 2-week break. You give your first reading assignment at the end of the season, and then we come in when you get back from Japan and we start the show.
Yeah.
And
The
how have
question
we
is-
not? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I wonder if there's a book that we put in mind to try to get ready for.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how have we gone this long and not talked about the trailer that dropped today?
Well,
Because I only
Reid
watched
said-
the first trailers.
Reid says he doesn't watch trailers.
Only the first one.
Oh.
And to get to the
This
fantasy
was
question
so
on the
good.
table, what about Montero? And my answer to that is he's bad. So no.
He's old, so he doesn't start one of the games.
Yeah, he may not get a full 90 in either game. His floor is maybe 5 points in 2 games, so 5 to 6 points is what you're looking at as maybe a floor for him, and I think that's not fantastic for a forward. I think you have a much better shot at one of these bigger name guys, especially since he costs $7 million. You could probably squeeze a little bit more out there, and I think you're looking at Shabilko even.
And I
I'd
mean,
put
why does
this-
Vancouver play the old guy at this point? Like, he's not in long-term plans for them. So, like, why is he still out there? You might as well get some young.
Yeah, Theo Bear has looked pretty good. He's 4.3. If you're going to waste that spot on a Vancouver player, go with the obvious Ottaru candidate and throw him on your bench and see what happens.
Sorry, I'm just commenting that I think FIFA would be the MLS video game, right?
I mean, that's what MLS treats as the MLS video game. MLS treats FIFA as the more of a game of MLS than it treats fantasy. I'm not bitter. I swear.
I saw your exchange with Manchester this morning.
With Ariel.
yeah.
Well, I mean, but she used to do MLS. That's kind of why I poked there.
Yeah.
Byron Price.
I was just looking at that. No, I have not read any of his stuff.
No. Christian on Priz. I think Reid recommended him. Did you have him in your team?
Yeah, I have Shabilko on my team right now. I was saying that he's definitely the one I'm waffling on the most, Christian. I have him in my team right now because of his previous form over the past 3 or 4 rounds and that game against Atlanta. One of that, so 2A, two reasons this is 2A. Atlanta does have that midweek game, cup game, Open Cup final, and I imagine they're going to go in pretty good at that so they can get some of the hardware there. I know their fans would like that a lot. And then, so there could be some tired legs. And then 2, Atlanta and Philly are playing for one of those home game spots in the East. So that's a huge game for both of them that I know they definitely want to get points out of that game because it has a bigger impact than some of the other games do. So that could bring out the best of Shabilko against that team. Could be a reason why maybe Atlanta maybe holds back some on Open Cup to try to be planning for that. But he's in my team right now, but he is definitely the forward that I am least confident in right now.
Montiero's been back and started the last 2 games for Philly, and that's been kind of their upswing too. He's played in the last 4, but he's gotten significant minutes. I think 86 and 90 in the last 2, and we kind of saw their downfall come when he went out of the lineup with the injury. So that's one of those with him being back. I'm going to start trusting Philadelphia players a little bit more. I still don't necessarily trust their forward situation. I think they've got a little bit of a shotgun approach, and it depends on who's in and who's out and who's on form. But Montiero's a guy. 5 and a 6 in those 2 starts after coming back from an injury. If his numbers keep going up, he should be good. But he's making the whole team better too. So that's just my take on it. But I'm happy to have him back. I think he is kind of the main part of that team right now with the way they play going forward.
One thing on Priz too is, I think Atlanta's defense is Atlanta is one of the few good defensive teams. So it really depends on what that Open Cup looks like. If it's kind of an easy breezy Atlanta win, Joseph Martinez goes off early and they see it out, I would assume that they'll be good to go for the weekend. Now, if it's a 120-minute affair with penalty kicks and it's a really struggle of a game, then maybe I would. The other thing for Atlanta too is if you look at Atlanta's schedule, they don't have a whole lot of big games. It's pretty much they play Philly, they play New York City, and then they have a bunch of cupcakes. They have a pretty good run in compared to some of the other teams in the league. Now, Jared asked about New York City. I would be okay with when you're going to pick them. So, for example, this week they have a between games. And the double game weeks they do have are all at home. So those aren't bad situations. I'm not as scared in those games as opposed to if they had a lot of game road. But now when they do go on the road, then I might be a little nervous. They have do some tough road trips. They have to go to Philly the last day of the season, and they have to go to Dallas. That to Dallas game has trouble written off for me.
Well, I have a little one I have to get to bed, so I'm going to sign
I was going to say, I think that's about how long we're going to take it. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back next week. So thanks much, and help spread the word about the video. Let's get more people in. Take it easy.
See y'all.